Red Bull just leaked an upgrade so powerful, it could erase their biggest weakness overnight. And that's only half the story. Because at the exact same time, Mercedes could be getting hit by an FIA clampdown that targets their strongest advantage. Right before Japan. After China, everyone thought Red Bull was struggling. Unstable. Unreliable. Out of the fight. But the data revealed something shocking. The RB22 has the highest performance ceiling on the grid. Higher than Mercedes. Moments where it is simply faster, in pure pace. But only for seconds. Now imagine those seconds, lasting an entire race. Because this new Ford upgrade is not about more speed. It's about control. Fixing energy deployment. Eliminating power drops. Sustaining maximum performance when it matters most. And if Red Bull gets that right in Suzuka, while Mercedes loses even a fraction of their efficiency advantage, the balance of power doesn't shift slowly. It flips instantly. Subscribe now, because what's about to happen in Japan could decide the championship before anyone sees it coming. What you saw in China was not Red Bull failing. It was Red Bull exposing the problem they've been hiding since the start of the season. Because the RB22 doesn't lack speed. It lacks control. And that's a completely different situation. Because when a car is slow, you need to redesign it. But when a car is unstable, you're sitting on something much more dangerous. Untapped performance. And China made that painfully clear. Because nothing made sense on the surface. Setup changes, no difference. Balance issues, everywhere. Energy drops, at the worst moments. Even a retirement linked to cooling. It looked like chaos. But underneath that chaos, there was a pattern. Every single issue pointed to one thing. Energy. Not how much they have. How they use it. Because in this new era, almost half of the car's performance comes from the electrical system. And Red Bull's system is pushing the limit harder than anyone else. Which is why it breaks. Which is why it overheats. Which is why it becomes unpredictable. But here's the part that changes everything. Because when a system behaves like that, it means one thing. It's not underperforming. It's overreaching. And that's exactly where breakthroughs come from. Because if Red Bull can control that energy, if they can stabilize deployment, if they can manage temperature and recovery without losing performance, then all those problems disappear. And what's left is the raw speed we already saw in Australia. That ability to cut through the field. That ability to set fastest laps. That ability to look faster than Mercedes, in pure pace. But only for moments. Now imagine those moments. Lasting an entire stint. Because that is exactly what this leaked upgrade is targeting. Not adding anything new. Unlocking what's already there. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because other teams can't see it. They can't copy it. They don't even fully understand it. But Red Bull does. Because they built the entire system themselves. Engine. Battery. Energy deployment. All under one structure. All working together, or failing together. And now, they are trying to make it work together. Perfectly. But here's where the tension builds even more. Because while Red Bull is fixing its biggest weakness, Mercedes might be losing their biggest strength. Not through performance. Through regulation. Because the FIA is starting to look closer at how teams are managing energy. How they extract efficiency. How they sustain performance at the end of the straight. And if there is one team that has mastered that invisible advantage, it's Mercedes. They don't just deploy energy. They extend it. They keep speed longer. They finish the straight stronger than anyone else. And that is exactly where races are won. Now imagine that advantage being reduced, even slightly. Because in Formula One, you don't need a massive change. You need a small one. A fraction of performance lost at the worst possible moment. And suddenly, the entire race changes. Now combine that with Red Bull unlocking their full potential at the same time. And this is where everything becomes dangerous. Because one team is gaining control, while the other might be losing it. And when that happens, the shift is not gradual. It's immediate. But there is still one question that remains. One that decides everything. What happens when Red Bull finally stabilizes the car and nothing breaks? And this is where everything finally becomes real, because now, there are no more excuses. No more testing. No more instability to hide behind. No more learning phase. Because if this upgrade does what Red Bull believes it can do, then the RB22 stops being unpredictable and starts being unstoppable. Because think about what that actually means. No more power loss at the start. No more sudden drops mid-straight. No more overheating that forces them to back off. Just clean, controlled, continuous performance. From the first lap to the last. And that is something we have not seen yet this season. Not from Red Bull. Not even from Mercedes. Because Mercedes has been strong. But they rely on one thing: consistency. They manage. They control. They extend performance over time. But Red Bull has something different. Something more dangerous. A higher ceiling. And once that ceiling becomes stable, it doesn't just match Mercedes. It surpasses them. Because now you have a car that can do both. Peak performance and sustained pace. And that combination is what defines dominance. But here's where the pressure shifts completely. Because up until now, Mercedes has been racing comfortably. They know Ferrari fades. They know Red Bull struggles. They control the rhythm of the race. They wait. They strike. But what happens when Red Bull doesn't fade? When they don't lose energy? When they don't drop performance? Because now, Mercedes has no safe zone. No phase of the race where they recover control. No moment where they can rely on their advantage. And that is where things start to break. Because once a team loses control, everything changes. Drivers push harder. Engineers take risks. Strategies become aggressive. And small mistakes turn into big ones. But here's the part that makes this even more dangerous. Because Red Bull is not just fixing performance. They are fixing reliability. At the same time, because all those failures, all those issues we saw in China, they come from the same source. Energy stress. Too much demand. Not enough control. So by stabilizing the system, they are removing the cause of those failures. Which means one thing: more speed, less risk, at the same time. And that is something no team wants to see. But now we reach the final moment. The one everything depends on. Because theory is over. Now it's reality. Suzuka. High speed. Constant load. Maximum stress on the energy system. If there is even a small weakness left, it will appear instantly. But if there isn't, then this is the moment. The moment Red Bull reveals the real RB22. Not the unstable version. Not the incomplete version. The final version. The one they've been building towards since the start of the season. And if that version shows up in Japan, then the first time Red Bull lines up next to Mercedes and doesn't drop back, That's it. That's the shift. Because from that moment on, Mercedes is no longer controlling the race. They're reacting to it. And in Formula One, the moment you start reacting, you've already lost control. And this is where the entire season could flip, in a way nobody is prepared for. Because if Red Bull gets this right in Japan, this is not just an upgrade working. This is a timing attack. Perfectly executed. Because think about the situation right now. Mercedes believes they are in control. 2 races in. Strong pace. No major weaknesses exposed. They are managing the championship. But that confidence is built on one assumption: that their advantage will remain stable. That no one can suddenly jump ahead. And that is exactly what Red Bull is about to challenge. Not slowly. Not over multiple races. All at once. Because when performance comes from aerodynamics, you see it coming. New parts. New shapes. New concepts. But when performance comes from energy control, you don't see anything. Until it's too late. Because suddenly, the car just stops dropping performance. It stops fading. It stops braking. And starts delivering. Every lap. Every straight. Every corner. And that's when the shock happens. Because Mercedes won't have time to react. They won't have data before the race. They won't have a counter ready. They will discover it while fighting it. And that is the worst possible scenario. Because now every lap becomes a question. Why are they not dropping back? Why are they still there? Why can't we break free? And those questions turn into pressure. And pressure turns into mistakes. But here's the final piece. The one that connects everything. Because this is not just Red Bull improving. This is Mercedes becoming vulnerable. Because if the FIA tightens even a small part of how energy is used, if they reduce that invisible advantage, then Mercedes loses their safety net. That final phase of the straight. That moment where they always had the answer. And if that answer disappears, at the exact same time Red Bull gains control of their system, then the balance doesn't shift. It collapses. Because now, Mercedes can't extend. They can't defend as easily. They can't rely on the same strategy. And Red Bull can finally use everything they've built. But there's one final truth. Because everything we've said, all the potential, all the theory, all the leaked information, it means nothing. Until one moment proves it. The first long straight in Suzuka. Red Bull ahead. Mercedes behind. Full deployment. Maximum pressure. If Red Bull reaches the braking zone, still ahead, then that's it. No debate. No doubt. No delay. The upgrade works. The weakness is gone. And the championship changes direction instantly. Because from that moment on, Mercedes is no longer controlling the season. They are chasing it.